So, everybody, guess what? I'm back again with more Bystial Branded. So, I actually won locals. Went undefeated with Bystial Branded. It's a pretty significant modification of my previous list, and I want to talk about it a bit for a while. So, uh, during the course of locals, I played against two Ishizu Tear, and I beat both of them. So, this deck and the way it's created is good against the Ishizu Tear. So we're going to talk a bit about that. And we're going to talk about just some of the side deck or the extra deck choices. You can still make this deck better. There's still improvements to be made. But yeah, we'll just go through it. So we've got 2 Libellion, so we've reduced it from 3 to 2, which is fine. But then we've increased the Bystial count. So we're playing 2 Saronir, 3 Druisworm, 3 Magnamut, and then we're playing Branded Regained and Branded Beast. So we're playing the full Bystial package for the most part, okay? I've upped the Bystial count because we're in a tier 0 format. We're playing against Ishizu tier. It's freaking everywhere. And these are the perfect outs to it. And also there's big dragons as well. So you don't need 3. You don't need 3 Libellion. You just need the 2. You send it and then you keep bringing it, or you bring it back with the Albion and so on. So then we've got just the Despia stuff. So we just play 1 tragedy. You only need 1. People in the comment section on the previous video were giving out of the fact that I was only playing 1. They're all stupid and they're wrong. You only need 1. It's a good mill if they mill you out. So the one thing that I would say about a Ishizu Tear is, as soon as they realize that they're not playing the mirror, they decide to go mill crazy because they just want to ruin your hands essentially. Problem is, there's actually stuff that we can and do want in our graveyard, such as this card, but we only need 1 of it. Dramaturge, you don't need Adlib. Adlib is stupid. You're not really making Mirror Jade in this deck, so you don't need it as much. Dramaturge fulfills the purpose much better. If you use it to fuse, then it becomes a 3k beater that can negate a monster effect, or the effects of a monster when a fusion summon monster happens. And guess what? Ishizu Tear, what do? They fuse monsters. And also link monsters and other stuff. So it's basically an imperm. It's a big ass imperm. 3 Aluber. This is your perfect normal summon of the deck. You want to use it to add Branded Fusion, or if you don't have Branded Fusion, if you have Branded Fusion already, you want to either add Branded Lost or maybe Branded Regain, depending on what you want to do. There's a number of different lines in this deck that you need to either learn or be able to improvise on the fly and just know that the right outcome is what's going to happen. So you just need to think through your plays just a slight bit in order to get the best results. So yeah, 3 Aluber is fine. And then, this is going to be probably controversial for a lot of people, but I'm right and you're wrong, and you're all idiots if you think otherwise. So 3 Albaz, right? Why 3 Albaz? So, guess what? What are the Bystials? The Bystials are dragons. What is Albaz plus dragons? It's Albalanadis. So, what is everybody and their mother playing in this format? They're playing Bystials. Even Tearlament, Ishizu Tear are playing Bystials. You can fuse away their ones with a set Albaz and just clear their board. Because oftentimes, what you end up doing is, if you open Bystials, you end up trying to stop them from fusing, and you'll usually end up with at least maybe 1 or 2 in the hand. And that will force them to let at least one Bystial through. So hopefully that's Magnamut. And then once you've 1 Bystial through, then you're contending with every single Tearlament effect that they activate. Because you can Bystial, and they might do a shuffle back as well. So they either can do a shuffle back or they can summon a Bystial. If they summon a Bystial, then if they go first, what you can do is just summon Albaz and fuse away all their guys, and then attack multiple times on the monsters that are remaining. Or whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyways, Albaz is an 1800 beater. You need more normal summons. You need less ways of fusing with graveyard. And fusing on field is kind of more important at this stage. So the other thing that it kind of does is it throws people off, because if they're playing the Ishizu Shufflers, which they definitely are, they're looking at your graveyard and they're going, what will I shuffle back? And if they see that you have 2 Albaz in grave, then they are going to assume that you've no way to activate Branded Fusion. But psych, you play 3. So they lose because of that. So you're basically playing around one deck, and this deck is Ishizu Tear. And so them milling the crap out of you is them trying to get rid of all your Albazes. So you actually need more Albaz in order to accommodate. And it's just it's a good card. You never, unless you're absolutely sure that you're going to get it off, you never use the effect when it normal summons to discard and fusion summon with their monster. What you do instead is you set this card and then you super poly, or you normal summon it and then you super poly. You don't do anything. You don't do any sort of effect that would allow them to stop the fusion summon. Unless you've branded Lost open, in which case they can't actually respond, so that's fine. Okay, so then you got Albion. Albion's an upstart goblin in this deck. It basically sends branded opening, or sometimes branded regain, sometimes branded lost, depending on what you plan to do with the rest of your turn. If you can get to branded beast and so on, it's quite good. You send it, put it in the bottom of the deck, and draw a card. Amount of times this will draw you an amazing top deck is insane. And also puts branded opening in the grave, so protects your monsters from destruction once as well, right? With branded opening. Really good. Final monster, I guess, well, kind of monster, right, is this Chaos Emperor Pendulum monster. So, like I said, Tearlament Ishizu is the deck to beat. Bystials are all over the place. And what do Bystials do? They banish lights and darks in your graveyard. The majority of the cards in your deck are lights and darks, and the majority of the types of monsters in your deck are dragons. So this can return a banished dragon to your hand. So in the event that you end up making Albion twice or something, and you have 2 Albaz banished, or you have no access to your 3rd Albaz, this lets you put the Albaz back to your hand, and also you can actually just hard summon it as well using a light monster, which in this case is just Lubellion. But it's a big beater, it lets you recur resources, and it's just a really solid card. Then we go to spells and stuff. 3 branded fusion. I'm not explaining it. It doesn't need explanation. You play 3. It's a good card. Bystial Theater. So this card needs a bit of explanation. Like I mentioned, you want to avoid stuff like fusion summoning with the stuff in your grave. You need to either be able to use your hand or your field. So this allows you to do that. It's sticky as well. The Patchwork engine is total garbage. If someone's telling you to play the Patchwork engine in Ishizu, again, in an Ishizu tier format, they're silly and it's wrong, because they're going to just shuffle back the crappy parts of that engine that they have and put them back into your deck and make you draw terribly. So they're either going to put back the stupid chains, or they're going to put back the patchworks while the polys are still in grave, and it's going to make the engine kind of disconnected. You won't be able to use it effectively. It's good for a turn 1 play, don't get me wrong, but your turn 1 is already really strong, so who gives a crap about the stupid patchwork engine? So this is for helping you crack boards. You can basically make a lot of fusion monsters if you have this in hand. This plus branded fusion equals you can go Albion, Lubellion, Masquerade, Albulinatus, Dramaturge, all at the same turn if you open decently. And that's provided that you start with branded opening to get to Aluber and you already have branded fusion in hand or something. You can set yourself up for an incredibly greedy play, but nobody's playing Nibiru, so it doesn't matter. And it's a really solid card. You need something that can stick to your zones. And yeah, that's basically it. And then also just to talk a bit more about Branded Beast and Branded Regained. Branded Regained is insane in this deck. And we'll talk a bit more about it later. Anyways, okay. So then we go Branded Lost. Branded Lost allows you to do some stuff in the summoning window. So it prevents you from them being able to respond and shuffling back things and stuff like that. Because Albion effect, if Albion effect is not negated, so to speak, right? Because you can't negate, you can respond obviously, but you can't respond to the activation. So if you go Branded Fusion, the effect is not to fusion summon, so you can Ash Blossom it. But once Albion is out, which is done by sending Albaz and Lubellion, then they can't respond within the chain of fusion summoning. So then you can get a really greedy play going where they literally cannot respond to the Albion effect into Lubellion, into sometimes Albulinatus and sometimes something else. Anyways, really good card. Also lets you add Albion for an upstart Goblin draw as well. Then we've got 3 branded opening, not explaining it. Branded red, to be honest, I would cut it. It's kind of a holdover from the previous versions of this deck. Not a very good card. It's good against Rogue though, but that's not what we're really worried about. It's fine if you can get it off. What ends up happening a lot with this deck is, like I mentioned, Ishizu Tear, if they know they're not playing against the mirror, they will mill the crap out of you. So what can happen is they'll give you so many targets for branded in red or branded banishment that they cannot physically shuffle everything away. And all you've got to do is sequence your plays correctly and you'll be fine. Yeah, so then we've got 2 Super Poly. Like I mentioned before, you don't really use Albaz effect unless you're certain it's not going to get negated. You use Super Poly instead, and you clear their board. Super Poly is insane cards, really, really good. Everyone's playing Lights and Darks. You don't really care if Kikalos mills 5. Well, sometimes you do, but you need to be very careful. But it's more so for clearing the crappy stuff like Dragostapelia and different things like that. Not necessarily for Kikalos, but if it comes up tight in a pinch, it's an overpowered card, so you should play it. We need to play overpowered cards in a format that's like with a consistently best deck. Then we've got Change of Heart. Change of Heart's a good card. Steal a monster. You don't need to commit anything onto your board at all. So oftentimes this can be your first point of play. It could be tactics. The thing with tactics is you need to wait for them to do a monster effect. This does not require any interaction. All you got to do is activate and target it. Obviously, since it requires targeting, that can be a bit of a problem. Sometimes tactics is better in this situation, but realistically, this requires 0 commitment to a play at all, and can allow for maximum output. You can steal anything. What you can also do is, if you steal an extract monster, you can activate Branded Fusion, make Lubellion or make Albion, and banish the monster that you stole from them as part of the fusion material to make Mirror Jade. Because it's just an extra deck monster. Who cares? And that way they're not getting it back, and we get around the fact that we can't link someone if we activate Branded Fusion as well. So quite a good card. It's not even a once per turn. I know it's only once. You only play 1, but just insane card. You gotta play broken cards to beat this deck. Branded Banishment. It's Super Poly basically. You don't have to fusion summon, but the problem is it targets as well. So oftentimes this and Branded in Red are one of my first few sides. I hate Branded Exclusion. Exclusion, I think it's called. Whatever the card is that summons the Raz Disciple and the Scythe. I hate that shit. It's quite, I'm sure it's good. It's good going first. It's a good maybe side option as well. I'll show you my side deck, but it's a good side option. This card is just fine. It's something to set with Albion. If in a really good turn, you can actually get to Albion and Albalonada, so you can add Branded Fusion to hand and set a Branded Dispel or Trap. And the thing is, you can add any of the spells and traps. You could add Branded Lost or Branded Regained or anything like that. Obviously, there's no point in setting them, but they're still quite good. So then we get to the final cards in the deck, which are basically the hand traps. We play 3 Ash Blossom. We were playing 3 Bell in the previous version. Bell is great. I mean, it hits the Shizus and stuff like that. It hits the Bystials. But Ash Blossom is way more diverse. It hits the Millers, which are often what they use to chain block, and they don't really expect it at all. So it can make them do really bad. It can make your Ishizu Tear player do really bad plays because they're trying to chain block. So they'll go they'll activate Kelbeck effect. They'll go Kelbeck Chainlink 2, Merly Chainlink 1 or something, right? And obviously that means you can't do anything to the Merly, but they are somewhat reliant on the Kelbeck, and in fact, they don't even realize it, and they're chain blocking the wrong way than they should be. They're actually more reliant on the Kelbeck going off than they are the Merly sometimes, because the Merly gets them to 1 card, whereas the Kelbeck gets them to 5. Okay, so Ash Blossoming Kelbeck is not the worst thing in the world. This can you can Ash Blossom Shiren, you can Ash Blossom Havness, you can Ash Blossom Merly on the field if it's normal summoned. You can Ash Blossom Kikkalos. It has a number of different effects. Like Pearl Rhino is not something you generally tend to Ash Blossom unless you're really desperate. But Ash Blossom is a card that people think does not exist right now in the current format. We make it exist, and we capitalize on the fact that people think it doesn't exist. Okay, same thing. This is the whole purpose of this deck. I mean, Branded Fusion in itself dies to Ash Blossom, so Why would we worry? Like, it's a card that doesn't exist in this format. That's why this deck can exist. As soon as people start playing Ash Blossom again, this deck kind of dies a death a small bit because Ash Blossom is in the format. But for the moment, it's not in the format, so we don't worry about Ash Blossom. So this deck is functional, okay? Final. We talked about unfair cards. You got to play unfair cards. This is the unfairest card in the freaking game. Someone was asking me, how do you play around Shifter in this deck? And the answer is, you don't play around Shifter, you play through Shifter. You use Shifter as your kind of not so much your win con, but you use it to make the plays that you would normally not make in, let's say, in normal Despia, okay? This is not your granddad's Despia deck. This is the newest version. And by granddad, I mean like Chris Lofton or whoever the fuck. It's one of those things where it's like the versions that they played or the version of the tier limits is not the same thing. This deck, for the most part, is Lubellion, Masquerade Control, okay? If you go first. It's Lubellion, Masquerade Control with Branded Beast and Branded Regain set. Or, well, not set, but active on the hand. With some Bystials in hand, or maybe a Shifter, or maybe an Ash Blossom. Not Shifter. Shifter would be what you'd be under, okay? So then you go activate Branded Opening, wait, or not, well, you don't have to wait. You just go activate Branded Opening, chain Shifter, okay? You send whatever you summon. If you're lucky, it's Tragedy. You send Tragedy. Summon Aluber, add Branded Fusion, activate Branded Fusion, send Lubellion, send Albaz, effective Albion, banish, what's it called? Banish the Aluber that you have on the field and some monster that you have in your hand, make Masquerade, or you do something different, okay? You need to think about the plays. There's a lot of different options you can do. Lubellion is a huge butt. Albion is 2500. All the Bystials are 2500. Shifter plus those fusion monsters are often enough to survive. Baguska is obviously a thing in this deck. It is what it is, but you can build up a bigger board through Baguska than they can. And overall, like you can make it so they can't get to Baguska as well. Or you just make it so that they have to pay 600 for everything they do. And that is also fine, you know? So, Masquerade Control plus Lubellion is the kind of way to go. So, it's 41 cards. You can reduce it. You can probably get rid of either Branded in Red or Branded Banishment. Or add an extra Super Poly or something else like that. Patchwork Engine, like I mentioned, not worth it. Allure Darkness is probably worth it. It's worth considering. This card is cuttable also. It's more for it's for win more scenarios. It's also to keep your resource game up. The thing that you're going to do a lot with this deck is most decks cannot outgrind Ishizu Tear. This deck can outgrind Ishizu Tear because you make them pay for every single thing that they have to do. And that makes them outgrind you. They have to make silly plays to summon Kaleido Heart to get rid of your Masquerade. And that it may not be the most optimal play, and it's usually not the most optimal play to make Kaleido Heart at that point in time. And it puts them at a disadvantage because they have to make bad plays in order to get around dying to their own effects that they're activating, okay? That's kind of one option. That's kind of one way to look at it as well. The other thing to look at as well is they think that milling is good if it's against a deck that isn't Ishizu Tear. Milling in this deck is fine because you get resources to the grave. Saranir, you can send Albi or sell Lubellion. Lubellion's an inherent summon, so they need to preemptively activate their shufflers in order to prevent you getting to getting to Lubellion a lot of the time, okay? You can get to Lubellion most of the time pretty straightforwardly and easily. And that's kind of somewhat your win condition is they either need to predict exactly what your play is going to be, or they need to wait, at which point it's an inherent summon and they cannot respond essentially to it. You can't go, oh, first thing in main phase, I'm going to activate Medora effect, target your Lubellion. Bro, it's main phase, you had your chance in standby. Just because you saw that I was going to make that play right now does not give you the opportunity to make that play. So I'm not saying to get sharky on this stuff, but you need to be aware of this, especially of the inherent summon stuff, right? As well as that, what you end up doing is you need to be very aware of the fact that they cannot activate the Bystial quick effect if you do not control a monster, okay? So those things crop up too. You got to play very cleverly with your Bystials and very cleverly with your Albazes, and it's actually a really fun deck. You know, and it's somewhat targeted to the Ishizu Tear deck, right? But for the most part, what it mainly is it's playable against the Ishizu Tear, which is what everyone is crying out for, and I am living proof because I've beaten 2 Ishizu Tears with this deck, and it snatches games from the jaws of defeat in the way it's built and with the way it plays. And you'll see, I will talk about a bit more about it. Anyways, we're just going to go to side deck before we go to extra deck, okay? Feather Duster, just a good card. Necro Banshee, Zombie World. I play more of these. I side these in going first against Flunder and also against the Ishizu Tear. The reason I side them in going first against the Ishizu Tear is because, once again, they need to attempt to preemptively shuffle this back if it gets milled off their effects, and in which case I go Chain Effect, and then I activate the Zombie World. And you might not think that's very effective, and it probably is. It doesn't seem that effective to a lot of people. But that means that they physically cannot use the tier elements that they have engrave to make Kikalos. They have to use the ones in their hand. And I believe hand advantage is vital in this game. And it can often mean the difference between them having a Havness on your turn and them not having one, because they had to use one in their hand to get the effect of the fusion summon, essentially, right? And you're just depleting their hand and their resources in that sort of way as well, right? And the other thing, like, they can't make Mud Dragon either, because Mud Dragon requires 2 different types for if it's dark. So they also need to use them from the hand as well. So that's another thing to bear in mind. It actually does, it makes things awkward, which is all you're trying to do really with this deck. You're trying to make their turn as awkward as possible for them. By means of disruption, such as Branded Beast, by means of drawing more cards off of Branded Regained, by means of burning the crap out of them with Masquerade, you know? That's your kind of, your overall win con. Make things incredibly awkward for them, you know? Like a teenager on a date or something, right? Anyways, Dark Hole, just a good card. Just destroy the board. Flunder is a pain in the ass, but also Masquerade beats it. If you're going first, as long as you get to Masquerade, you're all good. 3 Fenrir. These also come in when I'm sided in going first. Oftentimes the deck can just become Fenrir control for the most part. You just summon a Fenrir. Maybe you don't even add the other Fenrir because of Havness effect, and you just poke them a lot, right? You just poke them 2400 each time, or you put up another monster on the board. He's 2400 as I mentioned. Just a really good card, really solid summon. So that's it. Evenly matched. We play unfair cards. You need to play unfair cards. You don't really care about what they do on their turn. A lot of the time, you're just kind of going, yeah, sure, whatever, okay. There's a lot of times where you don't even use the Bystials because there's a good chance you might top deck something better, right? So unless their board is going to be absolutely insane, you probably even just forego using the Bystials on their turn, unless it's literally Magnamut and you're trying to gain advantage. But for the most part, you don't even need to do that, because you're actually putting yourself in a worse position if you hit the wrong tier limit monster off the Bystial. So let's say they mill 3, they make Shiren, they mill 3, and they mill Merly, and you go Merly effect, and you go Magnamut, target Merly, summon Magnamut effect, and end phase they go Chain Havness. You've given them 3 more cards, so you need to be very careful and very deliberate with how you activate your effects. So sometimes the best or better option is actually to do nothing until your turn, which is why we played this card as well. You know, what can happen a lot of the time as well is you can bait them into using evenly matched, or if you open evenly matched plus sphere mode, which is what I did one stage. I go battle phase, end of battle phase, evenly matched. They go crime. You're like, cool. But off of crime, they send one of the tier limit names, and they make the 3rd monster that they didn't have before. And now they have 3 monsters on their board, and you just go sphere mode. And then I go sphere mode, summon Fenrir, you know. And obviously you can't target it, but it will come back to you. It puts them really far behind in terms of advantage. They lose a ton of monsters. They probably milled the crap out of themselves. unless they've got Pearl Rhino, they're not coming back from that. So, yeah, Sphere Mode, just a good card. It could be Lava Golem as well, it wouldn't really matter. Anyways, we'll go to extra deck. Pretty straightforward stuffs. Once I've organized the fucking thing. Let's see. These guys there. Okay. That guy. We're not gonna worry about it, right? We play 2 Albion. Albion is the best one. This is like Branded Eldritch. You make Albion off of Lubellion and Albaz when you use Branded Fusion. Then you use the effect of Albion. You make sure and try and keep the Lubellion in your grave as much as possible. Then they have to preemptively use the Bystial as well, because once again it's an inherent summon, so they have to think and know and be smart enough to go on res Bystial target Lubellion. And most of the time they're not that smart. Or even if they are that smart, you can still come up with an alternative play as well, you know. This sets you up for you can make them pay 6 as well to do that, because you more than likely will have a Despia at that point. You can just go Despia or Masquerade plus this. So you send this off of Lubellion, and you go activate Branded Beast or Branded Regain, depending on what your kind of setup is looking like. And then in phase, you've got Albion effect. Which, if they have a Bystial, I mean, sure, fair enough. Then you've cost them, they've done 2 Bystial effects, and you have, they're probably going to win that game, maybe, but there's a good chance they might not, so you got to be careful and play it right. We played 2 Lubellion as well. Lubellion is the kind of recurrer of this deck, so one thing that I like to do with this is shuffle back all my Bystials and make an Alban and Alice. One stage I was playing against Barunic, and they had Mystic Mine up. I had no cards left in deck. I had 1 card left in deck. They got rid of the Mystic Mine stupidly. I Bystialed the crap out of them. I summoned 3 Bystials and then summoned Lubellion and went Lubellion effect because Mystic Mine was no longer there. Shuffled back 14 dragons. That's including fusion monsters as well. I shuffled back 14 dragons, made Albal and Addis, and killed them with 1 card left in deck. So those kind of situations can come up. This lets you recur your entire field or your entire banish zone sometimes. If you're really lucky, you play a ton of dragons. So you got to be careful and make sure you're using them correctly. This way sometimes you will end up banishing these off the Bystials. And then you just recur them back with this guy. So Albal is actually really important in this deck. 2 Masquerade. You really only need 1. You usually only make 1. It's kind of tricky to make 2 sometimes, and you're probably putting yourself in a worse situation. Like I mentioned in my previous video, he's not a dragon, he's a fiend, so you got to be careful with that. He just burns the crap out of your opponent. That's it. 600 times every effect. Shiren effect milling a name is 2 effects. That's 1200. And oftentimes if they mill a shuffler guy, that's 1600 or 1800. Sorry, 1800, not 1600. So that's 1800 they've taken straight away without you doing anything. My opponent against the Ishizu Tear got down to 3,800 life points. And then I made this guy. I made Queritus. He had 2 Bystials on the field because his Bystials outed my Bystials because I couldn't get to summon mine because he kept chaining his ones to them. So he had 2 Bystials on the field in attack mode. I made Queritus. I had Albion in the field. I attacked over both of them for maximum damage, which is, at that time, because of Scream, was 4,000 damage, which is more than great 3,800. Therefore, I won that game, and I snatched it from the jaws of victory, or the jaws of defeat, I guess. The way you do that is with this card. Like, there's incredibly powerful fusion monsters in this deck. Masquerade is one, it burns the crap out of them, and then you follow up and kill them on the crackback with this boy. You know? Then we've got Mirror Jade. Mirror Jade's fine. I don't rate it that much. It's fine, but because you're using Shifter, sometimes you can't use this under Shifter, first of all, because it needs to send to grave. At that stage, it just becomes a big beater. It's honestly probably one of the more consistent Super Poly targets, more than anything else. You make it with Super Poly more than anything. Sometimes you can make it with Lubellion. You're not doing the standard play of, Mirror Jade banishing your Aluber or anything like that. You're doing more complex and fancier plays because you don't really make Lubellion. You make you make Albion, and then you go from there most of the time. So it's good. It's there to be there. Obviously, the pop effect is great. Proskenion, I have it. It's also a super poly target, basically. That being said, never summoned it. You can't summon it off of Albion or Libellion, so it's not very useful. You can only summon it off Bystial Branded for the Branded, or Branded in Red, or Branded Banishment, or Albaz, I guess, right? But for the most part, it doesn't really come up, but it's just huge, and it lets you summon or banish from the grave. We've got Titanic Lad. Titanic Lad's good. In case in case you did happen to need to make Mirror Jade and you've no send effects left, you can summon this guy instead by sending Libellion and sending Albaz. And also in the end phase, you can use this to summon Libellion. In the end phase, summon another Albaz, and because you play 3, that's pretty sweet. Albanatus, I actually want to play 2 of this. I probably will cut the Proskenion for this guy to play 2 of it, because it's insane. Everyone's playing Bystials. You just contact fuse all the Bystials away, or you just shuffle back all of them with the Libellion from your Banished Sun from your graveyard, and make a multiple attacker. Now, it can only attack against monsters, but that's fine. Or it can only attack multiple times against monsters, but that's fine. And it's just a cool looking card as well. Guardian Chimera, you can only make it with no, you can't make it with Super Poly. You can only make, well, you can make it with Super Poly, but it has to be all on your side. No, you can't make it with Super Poly. It has to be one from hand. Never mind. You can make it with Branded in Red, or Branded Banishment, or the Bystial Theater. And Chimera is just a good card. It comes up. It's really good against Rogue. It can sometimes come up against Tearlament, Ishizu, if they've got no shufflers left in the deck, or in the grave, then you can probably use this pretty safely, you know, so it's quite good. Starving Venom, it's another super poly target. It's Albaz effect target. It is potentially the Bystial Theater as well. It's just a big beater, gets around stuff. Dragon Stapelia, this is for when you're playing against, it's quite good against the Ishizu Tear as well, because obviously they want to make Dweller, but using their Kikolos, you can summon this, or you can do things. You can get to the point where you summon this in the summoning window of Branded Lost, off of at the end. So basically, you can go Albion, Libellion, Dragostapelia, target whatever, and they can't disrupt it, they can't stop it, they can't negate it, they can't respond to it, and it can be all done within the summoning window. So quite a good card. Relative changes to make to the deck would be just to make more utility cards. I'd probably think about adding either probably Mud Dragon. Mud Dragon would be really good instead of Proskenion for a super poly target. Or also, yeah, mainly for a super poly target, but also just to get some extra stuff into your Banished Zone. You need to be careful about what you're fusion summoning with, though, because some of them are like level 8 or higher, or level 8 or lower, so on. But usually you can make Mud Dragons, so that's grand. Shoutouts. I guess shoutouts to Luke Murtaugh, who played not this version, but like a pretty similar version with Mass Change 2, which is actually a really good option in this deck. It's maybe more of a side option, and I haven't really tried it out too much yet. But he was playing that for Dortmund. It actually went really well. But I think the Ishizu Tear matchup was quite a lot. This version does a bit better against the Ishizu Tear. And overall, I mean, shout out to other, I guess, Irish YouTube channels and so on. So we've got, what's it called? Adams, TCG, Team Chain Block, all those other Yu-Gi-Oh teams that are out there. And that's about it, really. I mean, this is like the second Bystial Branded deck profile that I've done in a long while. But at the same time, it was a winning profile. It beat 2 Ishizu Tear, so I now got full verifiable proof that it is possible to beat Ishizu Tear when not playing Ishizu Tear with a branded deck. The deck is not budget by any stretch of the imagination, but it is quite good. So, do recommend, give it a go. I mean, net deck the crap out of this, right? And if you've any questions, what I really recommend to do is just experiment with what you can do with a turn 1 play. The best turn one thing you can have is branded opening plus a discard, either of Dramaturge or something else like that. You know, Ishizu Tear is the deck to beat, so you need to be prepared for that and build your deck correctly. Not put in cards that are bricks. You need to avoid cards or singular cards that are part of an engine that will break if you are missing other parts of the engine. You also need to accommodate by playing more of certain cards, such as Albaz in this case, or the Bystials as well. And you need to adjust your playstyle. That's really it. You can't sit on the same things that you've been happily playing beforehand. You need to be able to adjust, modify, and update. And like I mentioned before, if Ash Blossom becomes popular in the format, you need to ditch this deck. Seriously, you need to move on if that's the situation, because it's not worth playing at that stage. Especially if it's in the Ishizu Tear. If Ishizu Tear is still not playing Ash Blossom, then you can probably get away with playing this deck because it will still beat most Rogue anyway. So, yeah, that's about it. Yu-Gi-Oh!